Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. I found claw marks on my car. Every morning. The scratching started on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just gotten my car detailed the day before. Cost me $150 at that fancy place on Maple Street, the one with the complimentary coffee bar and leather waiting room chairs. My Honda Civic had never looked better. Midnight blue paint gleaming like obsidian under the garage lights. So when I walked out that morning, coffee mug in one hand, laptop bag slung over my shoulder, and saw those marks, I dropped everything. 4 parallel gouges ran down the driver's side door. Deep. Deliberate, like someone had dragged a garden rake across the metal, except the spacing was wrong, too wide for any tool I could think of. If you've ever felt that specific kind of rage that comes from someone messing with your property, you know exactly what went through my mind. Some punk kids, had to be, probably the same ones who'd been skateboarding in the Walmart parking lot last weekend. But here's the thing, and this is where you're going to think I'm crazy. Those marks weren't random. They followed the curve of the door handle perfectly, like whatever made them knew exactly where to aim. Before I continue, I need you to understand something. I'm not the type of person who jumps to wild conclusions. I work in IT. I troubleshoot problems for a living. There's always a logical explanation, always a fix, always a reason things happen the way they do. At least, that's what I used to believe. And now, the story begins. I didn't call the cops that first morning. What would I even say? Someone scratched my car? In suburban Ohio? They've got bigger problems than vandalism. Besides, I had that presentation at work. The one I'd been preparing for 3 weeks. Johnson Industries was considering our software package. And this could mean a $40,000 contract for the company. So I did what any rational person would do. I took photos with my phone, made a mental note to check the security cameras later, and drove to work with those scratches glaring at me every time I glanced left. The presentation went fine. Better than fine, actually. We got the contract. My boss, Sharon, even mentioned a possible promotion, but I couldn't focus on any of it. Those marks kept pulling at my thoughts like fishing hooks embedded in my brain. That evening, I pulled up the footage from my Ring doorbell. The camera had a perfect view of the driveway. I scrolled through hours of grainy night vision video, watching for any sign of movement. Nothing. Not a single person had walked past my car between midnight and 6 a.m. The motion sensors hadn't triggered once. But that couldn't be right, could it? I watched the footage again, then a third time, slowing it down, looking for any shadow, any indication that someone had been there. The timestamp jumped from 3:47 a.m. to 3:48 a.m. without so much as a pixel changing. That night, I parked in the garage. Wednesday morning came with the kind of frost that makes you question why anyone chooses to live in the Midwest. I'd set my alarm 15 minutes early, partly because of the garage situation, mostly because I wanted to inspect my car in proper light. The garage door groaned as it lifted, that familiar mechanical whine that I'd been meaning to oil for months. I flicked on the overhead fluorescent, and there they were, new marks. These ran along the hood, 4 lines starting at the windshield and terminating just before the Honda emblem. Same width, same depth, same impossible precision. My hands shook as I ran my fingers along the grooves. The metal was cold, but the edges of the scratches felt different, warmer, like they'd been made recently. How was that possible? The garage had been locked. I'd checked it twice before bed, even tested the side door to make sure the deadbolt caught properly. The only windows were those small ones near the ceiling. barely big enough for a cat to squeeze through. I called in sick to work. Sharon wasn't happy, especially after yesterday's success, but I mumbled something about food poisoning and hung up before she could protest. I needed answers. The first thing I did was drive to Home Depot. If someone was getting into my garage, I'd make sure they couldn't do it again. I bought new locks, motion sensor lights, even one of those Wi-Fi cameras that sends alerts to your phone. The teenage cashier gave me a look as I piled everything onto the counter, probably wondering what kind of paranoid breakdown I was having. Installation took most of the day. I'm not exactly what you'd call handy, but YouTube tutorials and determination go a long way. By evening, my garage looked like something out of a security company's wet dream. Cameras in every corner, lights that would trigger if a moth flew too close, locks that would make a locksmith sweat. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen with my laptop open, watching 4 different camera feeds simultaneously. The coffee maker gurgled steadily, keeping me caffeinated and alert. Every few minutes, I'd glance out the window at the garage, half expecting to see... what? I didn't even know what I was looking for. 3:47 a.m. came and went without incident. I actually laughed, a nervous sound that echoed in the empty kitchen. Maybe I'd scared them off. Maybe whoever was doing this had seen all the new security and decided to find an easier target. 3:48 a.m. The laptop screen flickered. All 4 camera feeds went black simultaneously, then returned a second later. In that brief moment of darkness, my heart stopped, because in that single second of lost footage, something had changed. I ran to the garage, not even bothering with shoes. The concrete was ice against my bare feet, but I didn't care. I yanked open the side door, fumbled for the light switch. The hood of my car now bore a single mark. Not a scratch this time, but a handprint. Or something like a handprint. The palm was too large, the fingers too long, and where the fingertips should have ended, there were deep puncture marks in the metal, like claws. I need you to understand something about the human mind. When faced with the impossible, it does this fascinating thing where it tries to create patterns, to find explanations that fit within our understanding of reality. That's what I did for the next 3 days. I convinced myself it was an elaborate prank, maybe someone at work, jealous of the Johnson Industries contract, maybe my ex-girlfriend, though we'd ended things amicably 2 years ago, maybe even my neighbor, Mr. Patterson, who'd complained about my lawn being half an inch too long last summer. But none of those explanations addressed the real problem, the one I kept pushing to the back of my mind. The marks were getting worse. Thursday morning brought scratches along the passenger side. Friday, the trunk was covered in what looked like a frenzied crosshatch pattern. Saturday, I found the first puncture. It was small, about the width of a pencil, right through the roof. When I shined a flashlight through it from inside the car, the beam cut through the darkness of the garage like a laser. Whatever had made that hole had punched through the metal like it was paper. I started researching. First, I looked up similar cases online. You'd be surprised how many people report unexplained damage to their vehicles. Most of the stories were obvious hoaxes, attention seekers with blurry photos and wild tales. But a few, a precious few, rang with the same confusion and fear I was feeling. There was a woman in Michigan who'd found claw marks on her RV. A man in Oregon whose truck had been systematically dismantled over the course of a month. One piece at a time. A family in Texas who'd abandoned their minivan after finding things inside it that couldn't be explained. None of them had answers, just questions and fear. I expanded my search. Cryptozoology sites, forums dedicated to unexplained phenomena, even, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, pages about supernatural encounters. I'd always been a skeptic, the kind of person who rolled their eyes at ghost stories and changed the channel when those paranormal investigation shows came on. But skepticism is a luxury you can only afford when your world makes sense. One site caught my attention. It was buried deep in the search results. A simple forum that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. The post that drew me in was titled, "They Mark Before They Take." The author, username SurvivorDave72, described something similar to my situation. Scratches appearing overnight, security footage showing nothing, the gradual escalation of damage. But unlike me, Dave claimed to know what was causing it. He called them collectors. According to his post, which read like the ramblings of someone who'd seen too much. Collectors were attracted to specific objects, not valuable objects, but ones that held significance to their owners. They would mark these objects repeatedly, testing, probing, learning about the attachment between person and possession. And then, when they understood that connection fully, they would take both. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to close the laptop and chalk it up to internet nonsense, but Dave had included photos. The scratches on his truck were identical to mine. Same spacing, same depth, same impossible precision. His last post was dated 3 years ago. It was short. "They're here. If you're reading this and have the marks, get rid of it. Get rid of whatever they're marking. It's the only way." There were no more posts from SurvivorDave72. I spent the rest of the weekend fortifying my defenses. More cameras, better locks. I even strung bells along the garage ceiling. A primitive alarm system that would alert me to any movement. My neighbors must have thought I'd lost my mind. And honestly, I wasn't sure they were wrong. Sunday night, I made a decision. I would stay in the garage all night. Whatever was doing this, I would face it directly. No more hiding behind cameras and locks. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I set up a camping chair next to my car, brought out a thermos of coffee, my phone, a baseball bat, and a flashlight with fresh batteries. The garage felt different in the dark, smaller somehow, like the walls were slowly closing in. Midnight passed without incident. Then 1 o'clock. 2. My eyelids grew heavy despite the coffee, and I found myself nodding off in the chair. The bells woke me. Not a violent ringing, but a soft tinkling, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Except there was no breeze in my sealed garage. My phone showed 3:47 a.m. I gripped the baseball bat, aimed the flashlight at the ceiling. The bells swayed gently, but I saw nothing moving them. My heart hammered against my ribs as I swept the beam across the garage, searching for anything. That's when I noticed the wall. Where there should have been solid drywall, there was now a hole, not broken or smashed, but perfectly circular, about 3 feet in diameter. The edges were smooth, like they'd been carved by a giant hole punch. Through it, I could see nothing. Not the darkness of night, not the side of my neighbor's house. Just nothing. An absence of light and color that hurt to look at. And from that nothing, something emerged. I want to describe it to you, but language fails when you're confronted with something that shouldn't exist. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, but seemed to shift and flow like smoke given form. Where its hands should have been, there were appendages that ended in what I can only call claws, though they looked more like surgical instruments than anything found in nature. It moved toward my car with purpose, those claws extended, ready to add new marks to its canvas. "Stop." The word came out as barely a whisper, but the thing paused. Its head, if you could call it that, turned toward me. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt its attention like a physical weight. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then it spoke, though not with words. The sound bypassed my ears entirely, appearing directly in my mind like a thought that wasn't my own. Attachment verified. Collection pending. The bells rang violently as it moved back toward the hole. Within moments, both the creature and the portal were gone, leaving only smooth wall behind. I didn't move until sunrise. Monday morning arrived with all the banality of regular life. Birds chirped, the newspaper thudded against my driveway. Mr. Patterson mowed his lawn at exactly 7 a.m., just like every Monday. The world continued spinning, blissfully unaware that reality had cracked open in my garage just hours before. I called Sharon and quit my job. She tried to talk me out of it, reminded me about the promotion, the Johnson Industries success, my future with the company. But how could I explain that none of that mattered anymore? That I'd seen something that made quarterly reports and software contracts seem like children's games? After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen and stared at my car through the window. The morning sun highlighted every scratch, every gouge, every mark that thing had made. My Honda Civic, purchased 6 years ago with my first real bonus check, had become a roadmap of something alien and terrible, but I couldn't get rid of it. That's the insidious part, the detail that Survivor Dave 72 had left out of his warning. By the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. The attachment they're testing isn't just material, it's emotional. Every mark they make deepens the connection, like a fishhook burrowing deeper with each struggle. I tried to think rationally. Sell the car. Donate it. Drive it off a cliff if necessary. But each time I reached for my keys, intending to take it somewhere, anywhere else, my hand would freeze. The thought of being separated from it caused actual physical pain, a tightness in my chest that made breathing difficult. So I did the only thing I could think of. I researched. The local library had a surprising collection of books on folklore and unexplained phenomena. I spent hours in the dusty back corner, surrounded by volumes that smelled of age and neglect. Most were useless, filled with obvious fiction or New Age nonsense. But occasionally, I'd find a passage that resonated, a Native American legend about spirits that claimed objects touched by strong emotion, a medieval account of demons that fed on the connection between people and their possessions, a modern UFO researcher's theory about interdimensional beings that collected items from our reality like souvenirs. None of them mentioned collectors by name, but the patterns were there, the marking, the escalation, the eventual disappearance of both object and owner. That's when I met Eleanor. She found me on my third day in the library, a woman in her 70s with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much. She approached while I was reading a particularly disturbing account from the 1950s, sliding into the chair across from me like she belonged there. "You have the look," she said without preamble. I glanced up from my book. What look? The same one my husband had, before they took him. My blood chilled. "You know about them?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "Collectors. Though that's not what we called them back then. We used the old name, the Hungarian one my grandmother taught me, but names don't matter. What matters is you're running out of time." She told me her story in hushed tones, glancing around as if the books themselves might be listening. Her husband had been a mechanic, devoted to a 1967 Mustang he'd restored himself. The marks had started small, just like mine. Within a month, both he and the car had vanished. The police found no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle. It was as if they'd simply ceased to exist. "But you survived?" I pointed out. Eleanor's smile was sad. "Because I wasn't attached to the car. They only take what matters, what holds pieces of our souls. The owner and the owned, together. So, what do I do?"
She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You break the attachment. Completely. Utterly. It's the only way to survive. But it's harder than you think. The connection they've been nurturing. It's like an addiction now. You'll need help. Eleanor gave me an address. A support group, she said, for people who'd encountered collectors. People who'd survived by severing their attachments before it was too late. They met every Wednesday night in the basement of an old church on the outskirts of town. I almost didn't go. Wednesday evening found me sitting in my driveway, engine running, staring at the address scrawled on a piece of paper. The marks on my car had multiplied again. Now they covered every surface, a twisted masterpiece of scratches and gouges that somehow looked almost beautiful in the dying light. The thought of leaving it, even for a few hours, made my stomach clench. What if they came while I was gone? What if I returned to find an empty garage, a hole in reality where my car used to be? But Eleanor's words echoed in my mind, running out of time. The church basement smelled of coffee and desperation, folding chairs arranged in a circle, fluorescent lights that flickered just enough to be annoying, and people, maybe a dozen, with the same haunted look I'd seen in my own mirror. Eleanor was there, sitting next to a man who couldn't stop checking his empty wrist where a watch used to be. She nodded as I took a seat, a small gesture of welcome and understanding. The meeting leader introduced himself as Tom. Former collector himself, he said with bitter irony. His attachment had been to a vintage guitar, a 1959 Gibson Les Paul that he'd played every day for 30 years. I know why you're all here, Tom began. You've seen them. You've felt the pull. And you're terrified, not just of them, but of letting go. That's what they count on, the attachment growing stronger even as the danger increases. One by one, people shared their stories. A woman whose grandmother's ring had started showing scratches, a teenager whose skateboard bore marks he couldn't explain, an elderly man whose collection of first edition books had begun showing signs of attention. Some had successfully broken their attachments. They spoke of the process like recovering addicts, describing the physical pain, the sense of loss, the emptiness that followed. But they were alive, free. Others were still struggling, still feeling the pull, still finding new marks each morning. When my turn came, I found myself speaking freely. The words poured out, every detail, every fear, every moment of confusion and terror. The group listened without judgment, nodding at familiar points, wincing at others. The car isn't just transportation anymore, I concluded. It's part of me. The thought of destroying it feels like contemplating cutting off my own arm. Tom leaned forward. That's exactly what it is. They've made it part of you. But here's the truth. You can survive without an arm. You can't survive collection.
He explained the process. It wasn't enough to simply get rid of the object. The attachment had to be severed completely. Spiritually, emotionally. Some people burned their objects. Others dismantled them piece by piece. The method didn't matter as much as the mindset. The absolute certainty that the connection had to end. But be warned, Tom added. They don't like being denied. The closer you get to breaking free, the more aggressive they become. You'll need to be ready for that. I left the meeting with a plan. And fear. So much fear. Thursday morning, I began. The first cut was the hardest. I stood in my garage at dawn, angle grinder in hand, staring at my beloved Honda Civic. Every mark they'd made seemed to pulse in the early morning light, a roadmap of obsession carved into metal and paint. My hands trembled as I put on safety glasses, the weight of what I was about to do settling over me like a burial shroud.
Tom had been clear. This couldn't be a clean destruction. No calling a junkyard. No quick trip to a crusher. The severing had to be personal, intimate, as deliberate as the marking had been. I pressed the power button. The grinder roared to life, its harsh scream echoing off the garage walls. For a moment, I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to put the tool down, to protect what was mine. Then, I remembered Eleanor's husband, Survivor Dave 72, all the others who'd waited too long. The blade bit into the hood, sending a shower of sparks cascading across the concrete. The sound was horrible, metal shrieking against metal. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. I carved a line straight through the center of their marks, defacing their work with my own. Pain shot through my chest. Real, physical pain. Like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart. I gasped, nearly dropping the grinder, but forced myself to continue. Another cut. Another. Each one hurt more than the last. That's when the garage started to change. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like lungs. The overhead light flickered, casting dancing shadows that moved independently of their sources, and the temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath misting in the air. They were coming. I worked faster, sweat freezing on my skin as soon as it formed. The angle grinder cut through the driver's door, the trunk, anywhere their marks had claimed my car. With each cut, the pain intensified, and the garage grew stranger. The concrete floor rippled like water. Tools fell from their hooks, clattering in a rhythm that sounded almost like language. And in the corner of my vision, I saw them. Not one collector this time. 3, maybe 4. They phased in and out of visibility, their forms more smoke than substance, but their anger was palpable. The air itself seemed to vibrate with their fury. One moved toward me, those surgical claw appendages extended. I swung the still-running grinder in an arc, not expecting it to connect, but hoping the gesture might give them pause. It didn't. The claw passed through the grinder like it wasn't there, reaching for my chest. But when it touched me, nothing happened. We both froze, equally surprised. Understanding dawned slowly. They couldn't take me. Not yet. The connection wasn't complete. The car still too intact. The attachment still too strong. But that was changing with every cut I made. A race. Then, could I destroy the connection before they found a way to complete their collection? I turned back to the car, ignoring the collectors as they circled like sharks smelling blood. The passenger door fell away under the grinder's assault. The windows shattered one by one, safety glass scattering like deadly snow. I was destroying 6 years of memories, 6 years of careful maintenance, 6 years of pride. It was agony, and it was necessary. The collectors grew more agitated with each cut. They moved faster, their forms becoming more solid, more real. One reached through the wall, pulling at something I couldn't see. Another made that sound again, the one that bypassed my ears and appeared directly in my thoughts. Cease. Attachment critical. Collection imminent. No. I said it out loud, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. It's over. You don't get to have this. I dropped the grinder and picked up a sledgehammer. The first swing caved in what remained of the roof. The second destroyed the windshield. By the third, I was crying. Tears streaming down my face as I demolished something I'd loved. But with each impact, the pain in my chest lessened. The connection was breaking. The collectors knew it too. Their movements became frantic, desperate. One lunged at the car, trying to preserve what I was destroying. Another reached for me, claws grasping at air inches from my face. That's when I understood the final step. I dropped the sledgehammer and pulled out my phone. The Honda dealership's website loaded slowly, my fingers numb from cold and exertion. But I found what I needed. The same model, the same year, even the same midnight blue color, available for purchase, ready for a new owner. My finger hovered over the contact dealer button. This was it, the final severing. Not just destroying the old, but accepting that it could be replaced. That what I'd thought was unique, irreplaceable, was just a mass-produced object. I pressed the button. The collector screamed, not with sound, but with something worse. A psychic wail that made my vision blur and my knees buckle. The garage walls cracked. Reality itself protesting what I'd done. For a moment, I thought the whole structure might collapse. Then, silence. When I looked up, they were gone. Not faded or retreated, but gone. As if they'd never existed at all. The garage was just a garage again, lit by harsh fluorescence, filled with the wreckage of what used to be my car. I sat on the cold concrete for a long time, staring at the destruction I'd wrought. The pain was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness that somehow felt worse. But I was alive, uncollected, free. My phone buzzed. An email from the dealership, asking when I'd like to schedule a test drive. I deleted it. I didn't need another car, not yet. Maybe not ever. The attachment had been broken, but the memory of it remained. A scar on my psyche that would never fully heal. Eleanor was right. Surviving meant more than just living through it. It meant carrying the knowledge that reality wasn't what we thought, that things existed in the spaces between waiting, watching, marking what we loved most. I sold the wreckage for scrap the next day. The junkyard owner didn't ask questions, just handed me $300 and had the remains towed away. I watched the truck disappear down the street, taking with it 6 years of my life and 1 month of terror. The garage stays empty now. I take the bus to my new job, a smaller company, less money, but they don't ask questions about the gap in my employment. Sometimes I catch myself looking at cars in parking lots, admiring their lines, their colors, their potential. But I don't touch. I don't get close. I don't allow myself to want. Because somewhere, in the spaces between reality, they're still watching, still waiting, still marking things that people love too much. And I won't give them another chance. But here's the thing, and this is why I'm sharing this story, why I need you to listen carefully. Last week, I noticed something. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, has been complaining about scratches on her garden statues. Says they appeared overnight. Says her security cameras show nothing. Says she can't bear the thought of getting rid of them. They were her late mother's. I tried to warn her, tried to tell her about the collectors, about the marking, about what comes next. But she looked at me the way I would have looked at someone telling this story 2 months ago. Like I was crazy. Like I was the problem. So I'm telling you instead. All of you. Because somewhere out there, someone is waking up to find unexplained marks on something they treasure. Someone is checking security footage that shows nothing. Someone is feeling that first twinge of impossible attachment growing stronger. If that someone is you, if you're lying in bed right now with your heart racing because this sounds familiar, then listen to me very carefully. Get out. Break the connection. Destroy what they're marking before they can complete their collection. It will hurt more than you can imagine, but the alternative is worse. And if you don't believe me, if you think this is just another story, just another bit of internet nonsense to help you drift off to sleep, check your car in the morning. Check your jewelry. Check whatever it is you love most in this world. Because the collectors are patient. They're methodical. And they're always watching for the next attachment to test. Sweet dreams. Oh, and one more thing. You know how I mentioned my phone earlier? The one I used to contact the dealership? I've been meaning to upgrade it for months now. It's an older model. Cracked screen, battery that barely lasts half a day. But lately, I've been noticing these tiny scratches on the case. Probably nothing. Story number 2. I found wet footprints leading to my bed. The puddle of water beside my bed wasn't there when I went to sleep. I'm staring at it right now. 3 in the morning. Milwaukee winter outside my window. Below freezing. All my windows locked tight. No pets. Living alone in this cramped studio apartment above the old pharmacy on North Avenue. And there's a puddle of water. Right there. Glistening in the streetlight filtering through my blinds. My mouth is dry. Heart hammering so hard I can hear it in my ears. Because the puddle, it's shaped like a footprint. A wet, human footprint. And when I lean over the edge of my bed to look closer, there's another one. Then another, leading from my bedroom door, straight to where I'm lying. If you're listening to this at night, maybe check beside your bed real quick, just to be sure. Because what I'm about to tell you, it started so innocently, so normally. The kind of thing you'd laugh off in daylight. But right now, in the dark, with those wet prints still visible on my hardwood floor, I need to tell someone, anyone, before I try to go back to sleep. Though I'm not sure I can. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you why I might never sleep soundly again. The story begins now. It started 3 weeks ago, middle of January. That brutal kind of Wisconsin cold that makes your bones ache. I just moved into this place after my breakup with Sarah. You know the kind of apartment. Ancient radiator that clanks all night. Walls so thin you can hear your neighbor's Netflix choices. Bathroom tile from the 70s that's impossible to get clean. But it was mine. First time living truly alone at 28. The first few nights were adjustment nights. Every sound made me jump. The radiator's ghost-like moaning. The way the old building settled and creaked. Mrs. Chen upstairs with her late-night cooking that filled the hallway with garlic and star anise. Normal apartment sounds that feel sinister when you're not used to them. I work at the Barnes & Noble downtown, nothing exciting. Stocking shelves, helping customers find their beach reads and self-help books. But it pays enough for this place and my student loans. Barely. That Tuesday was inventory night. Stayed late counting romance novels until my eyes burned. Didn't get home until almost midnight. The moment I unlocked my door, something felt different. Can't explain it exactly. Like when you walk into a room and know someone was just there. That lingering presence. But I was exhausted. Told myself I was being paranoid. Sarah always said I had an overactive imagination. Kicked off my work shoes by the door. Grabbed a Miller Lite from the fridge. My one luxury these days. Collapsed on my thrift store couch to decompress with some mindless TV. Must have dozed off because I woke up around 2:30 with a crick in my neck and the TV playing some infomercial about copper pans. Stumbled to my bedroom in the dark. Didn't bother with the lights. Knew the path by heart already. 12 steps from couch to bedroom door. 3 more to the bed. Collapsed face first into my pillow and was out within seconds. The next morning, that's when I saw them. Wet footprints on my bedroom floor, leading from the doorway right up to my bed. I sat up so fast I got dizzy. Blinked hard. They were still there, clear as day in the morning light. The prints were wrong somehow. Too narrow. Too long. Like someone with feet stretched out. Distorted. And they were wet. Actually wet. I touched one with my finger and it came away damp. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. They only led to my bed. There were no prints leading away. I jumped up, checked everywhere, under the bed, in the closet, behind the door. Nothing. Nobody. The front door was still locked. Deadbolt and chain exactly how I'd left them, windows all latched from the inside. The fire escape outside my bedroom window was covered in undisturbed snow. I grabbed paper towels, wiped up the prints, told myself maybe I'd tracked in snow without realizing. Maybe the radiator had leaked somehow. Maybe, but I knew. Deep down in that primal part of your brain that still remembers when we were prey, I knew those weren't my footprints. Called in sick to work, spent the whole day in my apartment with every light on, installed a new deadbolt I bought from Home Depot, one of those heavy-duty ones. Added a door brace, too, the kind that wedges under the knob. Felt ridiculous doing it in broad daylight, like a child afraid of the boogeyman. That night I barely slept. Every sound made me sit bolt upright. Every shadow seemed to move. But nothing happened. No footprints, no intruders. Just me and my paranoia and the clanking radiator. Started to feel foolish by the end of the week. Sarah was right. Overactive imagination, stress from the breakup and the move. That had to be it. By Friday, I was laughing at myself. Even told my coworker Marcus about it, and we had a good chuckle over beers after our shift. "Dude, you need to lay off the Stephen King novels," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. "That job hazard of working in a bookstore. You start living in those stories." He was right. Had to be. What else could it be? That night I went to bed feeling normal again. Almost forgot about the whole thing. Almost. Saturday morning, 3:47 a.m. according to my phone. Woke up to use the bathroom. You know that groggy, half-asleep stumble where you're basically sleepwalking? That was me. Shuffling across the cold floor, trying not to fully wake up so I could fall back asleep easier. Made it to the bathroom, did my business, shuffled back, and stopped dead in my doorway. There was someone in my bed. I could see the shape under my covers. The rise and fall of breathing. A dark silhouette where I had been sleeping just minutes ago. My blood turned to ice water. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Just stood there in my boxers and old Bucks t-shirt, staring at someone in my bed. Then the shape stirred, rolled over, and in the dim light from the street I saw nothing. Empty covers, flat sheets. Nobody there. I fumbled for the light switch, flicked it on. Definitely empty. But the covers were disturbed, pulled back like someone had been lying there. And the pillow. There was an indentation. Still warm when I touched it. That's when I noticed the smell. Lake water. That distinct mixture of fish and algae and something else. Something organic and wrong. Like water that's been standing too long. Stagnant. I ripped the covers off completely. Checked under the bed again. Nothing. But the sheets. The sheets were damp. Not soaking. Just moist. Like someone had been lying there with wet clothes. Or wet skin. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Sat in my living room with every light blazing and a baseball bat across my lap. Called the super in the morning. Mr. Kowalski. Told him someone had been in my apartment. He came up with his master key and toolbox, grumbling about weekend calls. "Nobody been in here," he said after checking the locks. "These are good deadbolts. Windows all secure. You sure you didn't dream it?" Showed him the damp sheets. He shrugged. "Probably sweat. You young people, always running the heat too high. Waste of money if you ask me." But I hadn't been sweating. The apartment was freezing. I kept the thermostat at 62 to save money. That afternoon I did something I'm not proud of. Went to St. Stephen's Church over on North 5th Street. Not because I'm religious. Haven't been to church since Grandma died. But because they had a gift shop. Bought a cross. Felt like an idiot doing it. The old woman running the shop smiled at me so kindly, wrapped it in tissue paper like it was precious.
hung it on my bedroom wall that night, felt even more foolish. But also, safer somehow? Placebo effect, probably. Marcus would have laughed his ass off if he knew. Decided to set up a test. Before bed, I sprinkled flour on the floor. Thin layer, invisible unless you knew to look for it. Anyone walking through would leave tracks. Flour on the bedroom floor, living room, even by the front door. If someone was getting in somehow, I'd know. Went to bed with the bat beside me. Took forever to fall asleep. Every time I'd start to drift off, I'd jerk awake, certain I'd heard something. But eventually, exhaustion won. Woke up at 4:13 a.m. Don't know why. No noise, no movement, just awake. That feeling you get when you know you're not alone. Skin prickling, breath shallow. Slowly, carefully, I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight. The flour was undisturbed, perfectly smooth. Except right beside my bed, in the exact same spot as before. A single wet footprint. But not in the flour, under it. Like someone had stood there before I put the flour down. But that was impossible. I'd checked, double-checked. The floor had been dry when I sprinkled the flour just hours ago. I sat up, shined the light around the room. That's when I saw them. New prints, wet, fresh. But these weren't on the floor. They were on the ceiling. Footprints, walking across my ceiling from the doorway. Stopping directly above my bed. I scrambled out of bed so fast I knocked over my lamp. It shattered on the floor. I didn't care. Grabbed my bat and my phone and ran to the living room, called 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's in my apartment. I don't know where they are, but someone's here. Are you in immediate danger? Can you get to safety? I don't know. I'm in my living room. I live alone. Someone was in my bedroom. We're dispatching officers to your location. Can you get out of the apartment? Could I? I looked at my front door, still locked, chain still on, but those footprints on the ceiling. Yes, I'm leaving now. Threw on shoes, didn't bother with a coat, unlocked the door and ran into the hallway. Mrs. Chen poked her head out, hair in curlers. What's all the noise? You okay, dear? Call the police, I told her. Someone's in my apartment. Her eyes went wide. She disappeared back inside. I heard her locks clicking. Waited in the freezing hallway for the cops. 2 officers showed up within 10 minutes, Burke and Ramirez, according to their badges. They went in with hands on their weapons while I waited outside. Came out 15 minutes later looking confused. Sir, we've checked the entire apartment. There's nobody inside, Officer Burke said. But we did notice some water damage on your ceiling. That's not water damage. Those are footprints. Wet footprints. Someone was walking on my ceiling. They exchanged a look. That look cops give each other when they think they're dealing with a crazy person. Have you been experiencing any stress lately? Taking any new medications? Officer Ramirez asked gently. I'm not crazy. I'm not on drugs. Someone is getting into my apartment somehow and... We'll file a report, Burke interrupted. But without signs of forced entry or any actual intruder, might want to consider staying with friends for a few nights. Sometimes a change of scenery helps with stress. They left me with a case number and patronizing smiles. I stood in my doorway, looking at those prints on the ceiling. They were already starting to dry. By morning, they'd be gone. No evidence. Just like before. But I knew what I'd seen. What I was still seeing. I didn't go back to bed. Packed a bag and spent the rest of the night at the 24-hour Denny's on Capitol Drive, drinking coffee and trying to make sense of it all. The waitress, Ruby according to her name tag, kept refilling my cup and shooting me concerned looks. You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. I laughed, bitter sound. Something like that. Well, whatever it is, it can't get you in here. Denny's is sacred ground. Nothing bad happens over pancakes. I wanted to believe her. Ordered a Grand Slam just to have something to do with my hands. but I couldn't shake the image of those footprints on my ceiling. Couldn't stop thinking about that presence in my bed. The lake smell, the wet sheets. What the hell was happening to me? Stayed with Marcus for 3 nights. Told him I had a water leak. Couldn't bring myself to mention the ceiling footprints. The way Burke and Ramirez had looked at me still stung. Marcus lived in Bayview in one of those new apartments with key fobs and security cameras. Felt safer, normal. His roommate was always playing Xbox. Place smelled like pizza and energy drinks. Exactly what I needed. But I couldn't stay forever. Had to go back. My life was in that apartment. My stuff. My independence. Couldn't let some, whatever this was, drive me out of my own home. Went back Tuesday afternoon. Broad daylight. Marcus came with me. Said he wanted to see this water damage for himself. The footprints on the ceiling were gone. Of course they were. Just faint watermarks that could have been anything. Old stains. Tricks of the light. "Dude, I think your upstairs neighbor might have a leak," Marcus said, craning his neck. "You should get Kowalski to check it out." "Yeah, maybe." He helped me clean up the broken lamp. We ordered Chinese food, watched the Bucks game. Everything felt normal with him there. Started to doubt myself again. Maybe I had imagined it. Stress does weird things to your brain. Sarah leaving, the move, money troubles. Maybe my mind just snapped a little. Marcus left around 10. Offered to stay, but I told him I was good. Needed to face this on my own. Can't run to friends every time the radiator makes a weird noise. Did my new nightly ritual. Checked all the locks, all the windows. Put the bat beside my bed. Left all the lights on. Settled in to try and sleep. 4 a.m. Always 4 a.m. This time I woke up to breathing. Not mine. Someone else's. Slow. Steady. Wet sounding. Like lungs full of water. Coming from the foot of my bed. I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis, I told myself. That's all. Just sleep paralysis. Happens to everyone. The breathing continued. In, out, in, out. Gurgling slightly on each exhale. Forced my hand to move. Grabbed my phone. Hit the flashlight. Nothing at the foot of my bed. But the breathing didn't stop. If anything, it got louder. And closer. Like someone invisible was crawling up the bed toward me. The covers started to indent. Little depressions. Handprints. Knee prints. Coming closer. I rolled out of bed, hit the floor hard, scrambled to my feet and ran. Behind me I heard wet footsteps, slapping against the hardwood, following. I burst out of my apartment and down the stairs. Didn't stop until I was outside in the freezing pre-dawn air. Stood there on the sidewalk in my pajamas, shaking, not from cold, from pure primal fear. Because when I looked up at my window, there was a shape there. Pressed against the glass. Tall. Too tall. Wrong proportions. And dripping. Water running down the inside of the window like tears. Then it was gone. Blinked and the window was empty. Dark. I couldn't call the cops again. Couldn't crash at Marcus's place again. So I did the only thing I could think of. Walked to the lake. Lake Michigan was only 6 blocks away. Frozen along the edges, but still moving in the middle. Black water under a black sky. I stood on the shore, feet numb in my slippers, and tried to think. The footprints, the water, the lake smell. It all pointed to... what? Something from the water? But that was insane. Creatures don't crawl out of Lake Michigan and into people's apartments. This wasn't some horror movie. But as I stood there, something caught my eye. Down the shore, maybe 50 feet. Footprints in the snow, coming out of the water. Fresh prints, still filling with new snow. And they were wrong. Too long, too narrow, just like the ones in my apartment. I followed them. Had to. They led up the beach, across the bike path, into the city, block after block. My feet were completely numb now, but I kept going,
The prints never wavered. Straight line, purposeful, like whatever, made them knew exactly where it was going. 5 blocks, 6, and then they led to my building, up the front steps, to the door. I stood there staring. The door was propped open, just slightly, like someone had left it ajar, which was impossible. It auto-locked. Always. Pushed it open. The hallway was dark, emergency lighting only, and there were wet footprints on the worn carpet, fresh, leading up the stairs, to the 3rd floor, to my apartment. My door was open too. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I didn't. Couldn't. Like a moth to flame, I was drawn forward. Had to see, had to know. Stepped into my apartment. The lake smell was overwhelming now. Water everywhere. Puddles on the floor, dripping from the ceiling, running down the walls. And in my bedroom, someone was in my bed, under the covers. Still. So still. I approached slowly, reached out with shaking hand, grabbed the edge of the blanket, pulled it back. It was me. I was looking at myself, pale, lips blue, skin pruned like I'd been in water too long, eyes open but clouded, dead, drowned. But I was standing right here. I was alive. The body in the bed turned its head, looked right at me, smiled with my face. Water poured from its mouth as it spoke with my voice. "You're in my spot." I ran. Honestly, don't remember the details. Just running. Bare feet slapping pavement, the cold not even registering anymore. Behind me, I could hear wet footsteps. Steady. Patient. Not running. Just walking. Like it knew I couldn't run forever. Ended up at the Walgreens on Burley. Bright lights. People. Security cameras. The night clerk looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Barefoot, pajamas soaked with snow and sweat, wild-eyed and gasping. "Sir? Are you okay? Should I call someone?" I couldn't speak, just shook my head, collapsed in the pharmacy waiting area, sat there shaking while she watched nervously from behind the counter. Every time the automatic doors opened, I jumped. But it was just late-night customers, normal people living normal lives. Dawn came eventually. With it, a kind of clarity. I couldn't go back to the apartment, but I couldn't run either. Needed answers. Real answers. Used the Walgreens bathroom to clean up as best I could. The clerk, Jennifer, her name tag said, took pity on me. Let me use the employee break room phone. I called in sick to work again. Then I did something I should have done from the beginning. I researched. The library opened at 9. Milwaukee Public Library. Beautiful old building. Felt safe somehow. Sacred. I went straight to the local history section. Newspapers, death records, looking for anything about my building, my apartment. Found it in a newspaper from 1987. Small article, buried on page 6. Local man found dead in apartment. Michael Prosser, 28. Found dead in his North Avenue apartment after neighbors complained of water leaking through their ceiling. Cause of death, drowning. The coroner called it highly unusual, noting that Prosser's lungs were full of lake water despite being found in his bed, miles from Lake Michigan. Police found no signs of forced entry and no explanation for the presence of water. The case remains unsolved. The address in the article. It was my building, my exact apartment. I sat back in the hard library chair, mind reeling. Michael Prosser, same age as me, drowned in his bed. In my bed, 37 years ago, kept digging, found his obituary, no family listed, few friends, worked at a bookstore downtown, lived alone. The parallels made my skin crawl. But it was the photo that stopped my heart. Grainy newspaper photo, black and white. but clear enough. Michael Prosser looked... He could have been my brother. Same jaw, same nose. If you'd shown me that photo without context, I'd have thought it was some relative I'd never met. Find what you're looking for. I jumped. The librarian stood behind me, elderly woman with kind eyes behind thick glasses. Yeah, maybe. Hey, do you know anything about drowning victims? Like, what happens to someone who drowns? She tilted her head. Physiologically? No. I mean, after. Where do they go? You mean their bodies? Yeah, sure. She studied me for a moment, then pulled out a chair and sat down. My husband drowned, she said quietly. Lake Michigan, 1973. Riptide got him. They found his body 3 days later. She paused. Why do you ask? I showed her the article, watched her read it. Her face went pale. I remember this. Everyone talked about it for months. The boy who drowned on dry land. She looked at me sharply. You live there now, in that apartment. Not a question. Somehow she knew. What's happening to me? My voice cracked. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, my grandmother was from the old country, Poland. She used to tell stories about the drowned. Said they don't always stay down. Sometimes they get confused. Think they're still alive. Try to come home. That's just folklore. Is it? She fixed me with those sharp eyes. You've seen him, haven't you? Wet footprints, the smell of the lake, someone in your bed who looks just like you. I couldn't speak, just nodded. He thinks you're in his home, his bed, his life. She leaned forward. The resemblance isn't coincidence. The drowned, they're drawn to what reminds them of themselves. Similar faces, similar lives, similar loneliness. How do I make it stop? She stood up, walked to a different section, came back with an old book, leather-bound, smelled like dust and age. Page 43, she said. But be warned, once you invite the dead in, they don't leave easily. I flipped to the page. It was in Polish, but someone had penciled in translations. A ritual, salt, running water, and I have to go to where he died? Where he truly died, not the apartment. She tapped the newspaper photo. The lake. You have to return him to the lake. How? But she was already walking away, turned back at the end of the aisle. Check the weather reports from that week in 1987. Find out why he was at the lake. That's where you'll find him. And remember, he's not evil, just lost, confused. He wants to go home, same as you. I spent the rest of the day researching. Found the weather reports. January 15th, 1987. Unseasonably warm day. Ice had melted early. Several people fell through weak spots, but Michael Prosser wasn't listed among them. Dug deeper, found a police report. Michael had been seen at Bradford Beach the night before he died, walking into the water fully clothed. Witnesses thought he was drunk or suicidal, but no body was recovered from the lake until it appeared in his bed the next morning. The sun was setting by the time I left the library. Knew what I had to do. Didn't want to. Every fiber of my being screamed against it. But Jennifer, the librarian, was right. He wouldn't leave on his own. He thought my life was his life. My bed was his bed. Stopped at home, Marcus's home, and grabbed supplies. Salt, bottled water, a picture I'd printed of Michael Prosser, and something else. Something I'd bought on impulse at the church gift shop, but never used. A small bottle of blessed water. Felt silly bringing it, but... Drove to Bradford Beach as darkness fell. The parking lot was empty. Who goes to the beach in January? Just me and my ghost, apparently. The lake was angry tonight. waves crashing against ice formations, wind cutting through my coat like knives. I walked to the water's edge, took out the photo. "Michael?" My voice was swallowed by the wind. "Michael Prosser? I know you're here. I know you're confused, but this isn't your home anymore." Nothing, just wind and waves. "I live in your apartment now, sleep in your bed, work at a bookstore, just like you did." I held up the photo. "We even look alike. I understand why you're confused. But you died, Michael. 37 years ago. You walked into this lake and you drowned." The wind stopped, sudden and complete. The waves still moved, but silently, like someone had hit a mute button on the world. Then I smelled it. Lake water. That stagnant, wrong smell. Getting stronger. He rose from the water like something out of a nightmare. My height, my build, my face, but wrong. Waterlogged, gray, eyes clouded like a dead fish. Water poured endlessly from his mouth, his nose, his eyes. He stood there on the surface of the lake, not floating, standing, like the water was solid beneath his feet. "That's my home," he said with my voice, gurgling, wet. "My bed, my life." "No," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. "It was, but not anymore. You died, Michael. This is where you belong now." "No!" He moved forward, fast, too fast. One moment on the water, the next right in front of me, close enough to touch, to smell the decay beneath the lake water. "I'm not dead. I'm not. I just went for a swim, just a swim, and then I went home, to bed. But you were there, in my spot." I understood then. He didn't know. 37 years of denial, 37 years of trying to go home to a life that wasn't his anymore. "What's your last memory?" I asked softly. "Before you went for that swim?" His face contorted. Pain? Confusion? Hard to tell on those waterlogged features. Sarah left. Said I was too much. Too needy. Too... He stopped, looked at me with those dead eyes. "That's not right. Her name wasn't Sarah." "No. Sarah was my ex. Your ex was named something else. Because you're not me, Michael. You're not alive. Not anymore." He looked down at himself, at the water pouring endlessly from his body, at his pruned gray skin. For the first time in 37 years, he actually saw himself. The sound he made. I'll hear it forever. Not quite a scream. Not quite a sob. The sound of someone's last illusion shattering. Oh God, I'm dead. I've been dead. All this time trying to get home, but home doesn't exist anymore." "It's okay," I said. And strangely, I meant it. "You can let go now. You can rest." He looked at the lake, then back at me. "Will you remember me? Someone should remember." "I will. I promise." He nodded, turned back to the water, took a step. Another. With each step, he seemed to fade a little, become more transparent. By the time he reached the waterline, I could see through him. He turned back one last time. "Thank you," he said. And then he was gone. Not dramatically. Just gone. Like he'd never been there at all. The sound of the world rushed back. Wind, waves, my own heartbeat. I stood there for a long time, until my feet were numb again. Until I was sure he wasn't coming back. Then I went home. My apartment. No wet footprints, no lake smell, no presence in my bed. Just me and my studio apartment and the clanking radiator. I kept my promise. Every January 15th, I go to Bradford Beach, leave flowers at the waterline, for Michael Prosser, the man who drowned trying to get home, the man who looked like me, the man who just wanted someone to remember. But sometimes, on really cold nights,
when the wind howls off the lake. I still check beside my bed, just to be sure, because the thing about inviting the dead in, they might leave, but the door never quite closes all the way again. And sometimes, in that space between sleep and waking, I swear I can smell lake water. Sweet dreams, everyone. Check beside your bed tonight. You never know who might be trying to come home. But don't worry, it's probably nothing. Probably. Story number 3. My twin sister erased herself from every photograph. I found the first missing photograph at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. The clock's red digits burned into my vision as I stared at our family Christmas photo from 2019. Mom, Dad, me, and an empty space where Sarah should have been. Not torn out, not cut away, just absent, like she'd never existed at all. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. I could still see the indent in Mom's shoulder where Sarah's hand had rested. The Christmas tree lights reflected off something that wasn't there anymore. And if I looked really, really closely, I swear I could see the faintest outline of her smile. Before I tell you what happened next, hit that subscribe button, because by the end of this story, you're going to have questions. Questions I'm still trying to answer myself. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. The story starts 3 weeks ago. I was cleaning out my childhood bedroom in our house in Salem, Massachusetts. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Salem. Of course, something weird would happen there. But this wasn't about witches or centuries-old curses. This was about my twin sister, Sarah, and what she did to herself. I'd come home to help Mom pack up the house. Dad had passed 2 years earlier, and Mom was finally ready to downsize to a smaller place in Boston. Sarah hadn't been home in months. Last I'd heard, she was somewhere in Portland, working at some tech startup. We'd had a falling out, one of those stupid twin arguments that spiraled out of control. You know how it is with siblings. 1 minute you're arguing about who ate the last of the Lucky Charms. The next minute you're not speaking for 6 months. Anyway, I was going through old photo albums when I noticed it. Our 5th birthday party. There we were. Or rather, there I was. Standing alone next to a Barbie-themed cake with 10 candles. 10 candles for one child. My hand started shaking. I flipped to another page. First day of middle school, just me, standing at the bus stop in my new Target backpack. But the weird thing? I was standing slightly to the left, like I was leaving room for someone. "Mom," I called out, my voice cracking. "Mom, something's wrong with these photos." She came upstairs, wiping her hands on a dish towel. The smell of her famous chocolate chip cookies followed her, the ones she always made when she was stressed. "What is it, honey?" I showed her the album, watched her face carefully. She squinted at the birthday photo, then smiled. "Oh, look how cute you were. I remember that party. You insisted on that Barbie cake." "Mom, where's Sarah?" The smile froze on her face. For just a second, maybe less. I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear? Confusion? Then it was gone. "Who's Sarah, sweetheart?" My heart stopped. "Sarah, my twin sister, your daughter." Mom's hand flew to my forehead. "Are you feeling okay? You've been working too hard. Maybe you should lie down." But I was already running to my room. To our room. Sarah's bed was gone. Her posters of indie bands I'd never heard of. Gone. Her collection of weird succulents she named after Game of Thrones characters. All gone. I tore through my closet, looking for the shoebox where we kept our secret twin stuff. Notes we'd passed in class. Friendship bracelets we'd made at summer camp. The photo booth strips from the mall where we'd made ridiculous faces. The box was there, but inside, only my things. Every photo showed just me, making half a heart sign with one hand, the other half missing, wearing a Thing 1 shirt with no Thing 2 in sight. That's when I saw it. a single photo wedged behind the others. It was from last Christmas, the last time I'd seen Sarah. We were both there wearing matching ugly sweaters Mom had knitted. Sarah's arm was around my shoulder. We were laughing at something Dad had said. As I watched, Sarah began to fade. Not all at once. First, her edges blurred. Then her Christmas sweater became translucent. I could see the wall behind her. Her face was the last to go. And just before it vanished completely, her expression changed. Her laugh morphed into something else. A scream, a warning. Then, nothing. Just me, laughing alone at an empty space. I must have screamed because Mom came running. But when I showed her the photo, just me. Always just me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah disappearing. So I did what any rational person would do. I went online, Facebook first, my friend list, 247 people. But I remembered having 248. Sarah's profile, gone. Not deactivated, not blocked. Gone like it had never existed. Instagram, same thing. But wait, there. A comment on my post from 2 months ago. From @GhostGirlSarah. Sisters forever, even when you can't see me. My hands trembled as I clicked on the username. User not found. I scrolled through my phone's camera roll. Hundreds of photos. Selfies at Starbucks. Group shots at parties. Family gatherings. In every single one where Sarah should have been, empty spaces. But not normal empty spaces. Weird ones. Like in the photo from Emma's wedding. There was a champagne glass floating in midair next to me. In another from our trip to Cape Cod, 2 sets of footprints in the sand, but only one person in the frame. That's when I noticed something else. In every photo where Sarah had been erased, there was a shadow. Not my shadow. A second shadow, always reaching toward me. The next morning, I drove to our old high school. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Yearbooks. Yearbooks couldn't be changed, right? Wrong. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, remembered me immediately. "Oh, sweetie, how nice to see you. How's your mom doing?" But when I asked about Sarah, that same look crossed her face. That flicker of something. I found our senior yearbook. Class of 2018. Flipped to the twins section. You know how yearbooks always have those cute pages for twins, triplets, whatever? Empty. The page was there, but it only showed other twins from our class. The Morrison brothers. The Chen sisters. But not us. I turned to the index. Found my name. Started checking every page number. Drama club. There I was, alone on the end of the riser where Sarah and I always stood together. Tennis team. Me holding one racket, standing in the doubles position. Prom court. Me in my silver dress, standing with a gap between me and Jason Martinez. But then, the senior quotes page. Mine was there. Thanks for the memories. Love, K. Right below it, an empty box. Not blank. Empty. Like something had been removed. And in tiny, tiny print at the bottom, print so small I had to use my phone's magnifying app to read it. Some things are better forgotten. S. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop looking for me. I typed back with shaking fingers. Sarah? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, check your childhood hiding spot. Midnight. Come alone. Our hiding spot. The old oak tree in Willows Park where we'd buried our time capsule in 6th grade. Where we'd carved our initials. Where we'd promised to always be there for each other. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal. Helped Mom pack dishes. Ordered Chinese takeout. Pretended I didn't see the way she kept glancing at me. Like she was checking to make sure I was still there. At 11:45, I slipped out. The park was different at night. The playground equipment cast weird shadows under the streetlights.
The swings moved slightly in the breeze, all except one. One swing hung perfectly still, despite the wind. The oak tree looked exactly the same. Our initials were still there. Sort of. K plus S equals BFF. But the S was fading? No, that wasn't right. It was there, but it wasn't. Like those old magic eye pictures where you have to unfocus your eyes to see the hidden image. Midnight came. Nothing happened. 12:01. 12:02. At 12:03, I heard it. Our song. The lullaby Mom used to sing when we couldn't sleep, except it was coming from underneath the ground. I dropped to my knees and started digging with my bare hands. The dirt was cold, too cold for October. My fingers hit something hard. Our time capsule. A old Folgers coffee can wrapped in duct tape. Inside, photos, dozens of them, all showing Sarah and me. Together, existing, real. But as I touched each one, they changed. Sarah didn't disappear all at once like before. Instead, she shifted, moved to the edges, became translucent. In one photo, I could see through her to the wall behind. In another, she was just an outline filled with static, like a TV with bad reception. At the bottom of the can, a letter. Sarah's handwriting. K, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not dead. Worse. Erased. It started small. People forgetting my name. Photos getting blurry. Then, bigger things. My social security number stopped working. My driver's license became invalid. It's like I'm being deleted from reality. I don't know why this is happening, but I know it's connected to what we found in Dad's study. The files, the experiments. You were right to be scared. I should have listened. I'm trying to stop it, but I can't hold on much longer. Every day, I fade a little more. Mom can't see me anymore. Dad forgot I existed before he died. You're the only one who still remembers. But even that's starting to slip. Whatever you do, don't look for the files. Don't go in the basement. And whatever happens, don't trust the man with the blue tie. I love you, even when you can't remember me. The man with the blue tie. My blood ran cold. I'd seen him. Yesterday. At the grocery store, standing at the end of the cereal aisle, watching me. His tie had been such a vivid blue, it hurt to look at. A twig snapped behind me. I spun around. Nothing there. But on the ground, fresh footprints. 2 sets. One leading to where I knelt, and one that stopped 3 feet away. The second set was smaller. Sarah's size. I ran home. My mind raced with questions. What files? What experiments? Dad had been a professor at Salem State University, taught theoretical physics, boring stuff about quantum mechanics and parallel dimensions. Oh, God. Mom was asleep when I got back. Good. I crept to Dad's study, a room we'd barely touched since he died. It still smelled like his pipe tobacco and old books. His filing cabinet was locked, but I knew where he kept the key. Under the ceramic frog Sarah had made in art class. The one that was supposed to be a cat, but turned out wrong. The files were there, folders labeled with code names. Project Mirror. Twin Paradox. Dimensional Bleed. I opened Twin Paradox first. Inside, photos of Sarah and me as babies. But not normal baby photos. These were taken in some kind of lab. We were in separate incubators, connected by wires and machines. Notes in Dad's handwriting. Day 47. Subjects show unusual quantum entanglement. When Subject A, Catherine, cries, Subject B, Sarah, shows identical brainwave patterns, despite being in soundproof chambers. Day 92. First successful dimensional split. Subject B existed in parallel state for 3.7 seconds before reconverging. No apparent side effects. Day 130. University threatening to shut down project. Ethics committee asking too many questions. Moving research to home laboratory. Home laboratory. The basement. We'd never been allowed in the basement as kids. Dad said it was dangerous. Construction stuff, exposed wires. Even after he died, Mom kept it locked. But I had to know. The basement door was behind the water heater, hidden unless you knew where to look. The lock was newer, much newer than the door, like someone had replaced it recently. It took me 20 minutes to pick it. Thank you, YouTube tutorials. The stairs descended into darkness. I used my phone's flashlight, each step creaking under my weight. The basement wasn't finished like I'd expected. Instead, it was wrong. The walls were covered in equations. Photos of Sarah and me at different ages, connected by red string like some conspiracy theorist's fever dream. And in the center of the room, a chair. Just an ordinary wooden chair, except for the straps on the arms and legs, except for the wires leading to machines I couldn't identify, except for the dark stains on the floor beneath it. On the wall behind the chair, more photos. But these weren't of us. They were of other twins, dozens of them. And in each set, one twin was crossed out in red marker. A notebook lay open on a desk. Dad's final entry, dated just a week before his heart attack. The process is accelerating. Sarah is beginning to phase between dimensions. Catherine remains anchored, but for how long? The quantum entanglement is breaking down. If I can't stabilize them both, we'll lose Sarah entirely. I've contacted Dr. Reeves. He claims he can help, but his price. I can't let him near Catherine. There has to be another way. Sarah knows something's wrong. She's been having the dreams again, seeing herself disappear. I've told her it's just nightmares, but she's too smart. Just like her mother. If something happens to me, Margaret must never know the truth. The guilt would destroy her. She agreed to the initial experiments because we needed the money, but she never knew how far I took it. God forgive me. I was trying to understand consciousness, to prove that human existence transcends single dimensions. I never meant for this to happen. The man in the blue tie came again today. He says Sarah's erasure is inevitable now, that she's become unstuck in reality, that the only way to save her is to... The entry ended there. Beneath it, in different handwriting, newer ink, 3 words. She chose herself. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Get out, now. I heard footsteps above me, slow, deliberate. Mom was awake. But as I turned to leave, I saw one more thing, a mirror on the far wall, and in it, Sarah, clear as day, standing right beside me. Her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Her hand pressed against the glass from the other side. Then the lights went out. In the darkness, I heard her voice. Not from the mirror. From everywhere. From nowhere. Katie, you found it. Sarah? My voice echoed in the black. Where are you? I'm here. I'm there. I'm nowhere. Her laugh was hollow. Wrong. Dad tried to fix it, you know, after he realized what he'd done. But you can't glue a broken dimension back together. The lights flickered back on. The mirror showed only my reflection now, but the other photos, in every one, Sarah was a little clearer, like she was coming back into focus. I've been trying to hold on, her voice continued, staying in the edges, the between spaces. But it hurts, Katie, existing and not existing at the same time. It hurts so much. Tears ran down my face. Tell me how to fix this. There has to be a way. There is. A pause. Dad figured it out before he died. The man in the blue tie, Dr. Reeves. He knew all along. Two consciousness can't occupy the same quantum space indefinitely. When Dad split us, he created an imbalance. One of us has to fully exist. The other... No. I shook my head. No. There has to be another way. There isn't. Her voice was fading now. I'm tired, Katie. So tired of fighting to stay real. Every day I lose more of myself. Memories, feelings. Soon there won't be enough left to save. The mirror began to glow. Sarah appeared again, clearer than before. She looked exactly like I remembered, except for her eyes. They were older, sadder. Dr. Reeves gave me a choice, she said. I could take your place, anchor myself to this reality while you faded, or I could let go completely, erase myself from existence so you could live without the quantum entanglement dragging you into the void with me. My knees buckled. Sarah, no. I chose, Katie. I chose you. But I did it wrong. Tried to do it slowly so it wouldn't hurt as much. All I did was prolong the agony, make it worse for both of us. The photos on the walls began to move. In each one, Sarah grew clearer while I began to fade, the process reversing. But you kept looking for me, Sarah continued. Kept remembering. Your love. It's like an anchor. It won't let me go, and as long as you hold on, we're both stuck in this hell. I won't forget you, I sobbed. I can't. You have to. Sarah pressed both hands against the mirror. Please, Katie, let me go. Let me finish what I started. It's the only way you'll be free. The room started spinning. The equations on the walls glowed and shifted. The machines hummed to life, decades-old components suddenly operational. The chair, Sarah whispered. Sit in the chair. It's the only way to sever the connection completely, to let me erase myself properly this time. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I looked at my sister, my twin, my other half, and saw the pain in her eyes, the exhaustion of existing between worlds. I sat down. The straps activated automatically, pinning my arms and legs. The machines grew louder. Electricity coursed through the wires, not painful, but strange, like my atoms were being rearranged. I need you to do something for me, Sarah said. The mirror was cracking now, spiderweb fractures spreading from where her hands touched. When this is over, when you wake up, you won't remember me. No one will. But somewhere, deep down, you might feel like something's missing, like there's a hole where someone used to be. Sarah, please. When you feel that emptiness, she continued, I want you to fill it. Live twice as hard. Love twice as much. Be happy enough for both of us. Promise me. I promise, I choked out. I love you, Katie. In every dimension, in every reality. Even the ones where I never existed. The mirror shattered. The room flooded with blinding white light. I felt something fundamental inside me tear, like losing half my soul. The pain was indescribable. I screamed. Then, nothing. I woke up in my childhood bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the windows. My head pounded like the worst hangover of my life. Katie? Mom's voice from downstairs. Breakfast is ready. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face. In the mirror I looked normal, except for my eyes. They seemed sadder somehow, older. Downstairs, Mom had made pancakes, my favorite. She smiled as I sat down, but there was something in her expression, a flicker of confusion. Did you sleep okay, honey? I heard you moving around last night. Yeah, just weird dreams. She nodded, but her hand hesitated as she set down my plate, like she was going to set down two but caught herself. After breakfast, I helped her pack. In the photo albums, all the pictures showed just me. Normal photos. No weird gaps or floating objects.
No shadows reaching for empty spaces. Just me, living my life. But sometimes, when I looked at them from the corner of my eye, I swear I could see something else. A faint outline. An echo of someone who might have been. That night, I found something in my jewelry box. A necklace I didn't remember owning. Half of a heart on a silver chain. The edge was jagged, like it was meant to connect to another piece. Inside, engraved so small, I almost missed it. Sisters, forever. I put it on. It felt warm against my skin. Familiar. I don't know why I kept it. I don't know why looking at it makes me sad. I don't know why I sometimes set 2 cups of coffee in the morning, or why I always leave space beside me in photos, or why I can't watch The Parent Trap without crying. But I know there's a hole in my life, a gap where something, someone important used to be. And late at night, when I can't sleep, I swear I hear a voice, faint, distant, like an echo of an echo. Live twice as hard, love twice as much. So I do, even though I don't know why, even though I can't remember who asked me to. They say identical twins share a special bond, that they can feel each other's pain, finish each other's sentences, know when something's wrong even from miles away. I wouldn't know. I've always been an only child. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the world feels thin, I catch myself looking at my reflection and wondering why it feels like I'm only seeing half the picture. If you've ever felt that way, like someone important vanished from your life but you can't remember who, let me know in the comments below. Share this story with someone who might understand, and subscribe, because I have more stories to tell. Stories about the things we've lost, the people we've forgotten, the pieces of ourselves that exist in the spaces between. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people remember, the forgotten can find their way back home. But probably not. After all, some erasures are permanent, some choices can't be undone, and some sisters love you enough to disappear. Story number 4. The House That Ages Everyone Who Enters. I found the listing on a Tuesday afternoon. $75,000 for a Victorian mansion in Willow Creek, Oregon. The price was wrong. Had to be. Properties like that went for $500,000 minimum in this market. But there it was, right on the screen. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, original hardwood floors, wraparound porch, and that price. I screenshot it immediately, sent it to my wife Sarah with 17 exclamation points. It's probably haunted. She texted back with a laughing emoji. I wish she'd been right. I wish it had just been ghosts. Before I tell you what happened in that house, I need you to understand something. When you hear this story, you're going to think I'm making it up. You're going to rationalize it, explain it away. That's what I would have done 3 weeks ago. But I need someone to know the truth, because I don't have much time left. If you're listening to this late at night, maybe turn on another light. And whatever you do, if you ever see that listing, don't click on it. Don't even look at the photos. The story begins now. The realtor's name was Janet Morrison. Pleasant woman, mid-50s, drove a pearl-white Lexus that probably cost more than my annual salary. She met us at the property on a crisp Thursday morning, autumn leaves crunching under our feet as we walked up the stone pathway. "I'll be honest with you both," Janet said, fumbling with an old brass key. "This property has been difficult to move." Sarah squeezed my hand. We'd been looking for 6 months, priced out of everything decent. This was our chance. "Why?" I asked. Janet paused at the door. "The previous owners left rather suddenly. There have been stories, but you know how small towns are. People talk." The key turned with a grinding click that seemed too loud in the morning quiet. The interior was stunning. Original Victorian details everywhere. Carved banisters, crown molding, those old glass doorknobs that caught the light. The air smelled like vanilla and old wood, not the musty dampness you'd expect from a house sitting empty. "How long has it been vacant?" Sarah asked, running her fingers along the spotless mantelpiece. "About 18 months, Janet said, but something flickered across her face, a micro-expression I couldn't quite catch. We toured each room, our footsteps echoing on the hardwood. In what would have been the master bedroom, I noticed something odd. There were rectangular patches on the walls where the paint looked fresher, like pictures had hung there for years, then been removed. "The previous owners," I started. "Why did they—" "Would you like to see the basement?" Janet interrupted, already heading for the stairs. The basement was unfinished but dry. Stone foundation, probably original. There was a workbench in one corner, tools still hanging on the pegboard. A calendar on the wall showed March 2023, 7 months ago. "They left their tools?" Sarah whispered. Janet was already heading back upstairs. "The price includes everything left behind. Think of it as a bonus." Back in the kitchen, she spread the paperwork on the granite island. "I do need to disclose one thing. State law requires it." She pulled out a form. "There was a death in the home." My stomach tightened. "Recently?" No, back in 1978, natural causes. An elderly woman, the original owner, 97 years old, passed peacefully in her sleep." Sarah and I exchanged glances. That wasn't so bad. Old houses had history. "Is that why the price is so low?" Sarah asked. Janet's smile was too quick. "Partly. Also, the owners were motivated. New job overseas, needed to sell fast." I should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why a house this perfect, in this market, would sit empty for 18 months. Should have noticed how Janet kept checking her watch, how she stayed near the door during the entire tour. But all I could think about was that price, our chance to finally own something beautiful. We signed the papers that afternoon. 3 weeks later, we pulled up with the moving truck. The house looked different in the overcast October light, taller somehow, like it was stretching up toward the gray sky. The windows seemed darker, even though the electricity had been turned on. "Home, sweet home," Sarah said, but her voice was thin. The movers were 2 local guys, Brett and Connor, early 20s, muscled, the kind who probably played football at Willow Creek High. They started hauling boxes while Sarah and I directed traffic. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. Brett came out after taking a load to the 2nd floor, rubbing his forehead. "Weird. Got a killer headache soon as I hit the upstairs hallway." "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just..." He looked confused. "Feel kinda dizzy, like when you stand up too fast." Connor emerged a few minutes later, holding his lower back. "Dude, my back's killing me. Feels like I pulled something." They were both young, fit guys. The boxes weren't that heavy. By lunch, both movers were sitting on the porch steps, looking exhausted. Brett kept rubbing his eyes. "Sorry, man. We don't usually crap out like this. Just feel really tired." I told them to take a break, started moving boxes myself. The moment I entered the house, I felt it too, a subtle pressure, like the air was thicker inside. By the time I reached the 2nd floor, my knees ached. My lower back throbbed, the kind of pains I associated with my dad, not myself at 32. Sarah found me sitting on the landing, catching my breath. "You too?" she asked. There were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there that morning. "Just tired from the drive," I said. We both knew that wasn't true. The movers left early, apologizing profusely. Brett's hands were shaking as he backed the truck out. I noticed in the side mirror that some of his hair looked gray. Trick of the light, had to be. That night, unpacking in the master bedroom, Sarah held up her hand. "Look at this." There were age spots on her knuckles, faint brown marks that hadn't been there before. "It's just dirt," I said, but when she tried to wash them off, they stayed. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror before bed.
Was that a line across my forehead? When had that appeared? Maybe we're just exhausted, Sarah said, crawling under the covers. New house stress. But as I lay there listening to the house settle around us, I kept thinking about Brett's gray hair, about Connor's hobbled walk to the truck, about the way Janet had stayed by the door, never venturing deep into the house. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed, 11:47 p.m. When I woke at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom, it said 11:52 p.m. 5 minutes had passed, but I'd been asleep for hours. Hadn't I? We tried to rationalize it at first. Stress from the move, maybe a gas leak causing hallucinations. I bought a carbon monoxide detector. It showed normal levels. Had the water tested, came back clean. But the changes were undeniable. Every morning we woke up a little more worn down. Sarah found a gray hair, then another. The laugh lines around her eyes deepened into actual wrinkles. My joints ached constantly. I started needing reading glasses, something I'd never needed before. The house felt alive around us. Not malevolent exactly, just hungry, like it was feeding on something we couldn't see. I started timing things obsessively. A trip from the kitchen to the bedroom upstairs took 3 minutes, but my watch would show 15 minutes had passed, sometimes 20. Time moved differently inside the house. Sarah began working from the coffee shop downtown. I can't concentrate in there, she said. It's like my brain is full of fog. But evenings, we had to return. It was our home, after all. We'd invested everything. I found the first journal in the attic while looking for a water leak, tucked behind a beam, wrapped in plastic. The handwriting on the first page made my blood chill. Day 1. Just moved into our dream house. Can't believe the price. Janet from Coldwell Realty was so helpful. The same realtor. Different year, 2018. The entries started optimistic, then grew increasingly frantic. Day 12. Martha says I look tired. Looked in mirror, she's right. When did I get these wrinkles? Day 20. Both kids stayed home sick from school. They look pale, older somehow. Day 31. Found gray in Tommy's hair. He's only 7. Day 45. Martha fell down the stairs, says her knees gave out. She's 34. Why are her knees giving out? Day 58. Leaving tomorrow. Don't care about the money. The house wants something we can't give. The last entry was different. Shaky handwriting like an elderly person's. It's not the house, it's what's under it, what they built it on. Time isn't right here. We're moths burning up in slow motion, and we can't even see the flame. I heard footsteps on the attic stairs. Sarah's voice, but raspier than it should be. Find anything? When she appeared, I had to stifle a gasp. More gray streaked her hair. The skin on her neck looked looser. We need to leave, I said. And go where? We spent everything on this place. She was right. We were trapped. That night, I did the math. If we aged a year for every week in the house, we had maybe 6 months before. I didn't finish the calculation. I found more journals, hidden in the basement walls, stuffed under floorboards, tucked behind the water heater. Dozens of them dating back decades, all telling the same story. Families moving in, aging rapidly, fleeing in terror. Or not fleeing at all. In the basement's darkest corner, I found a metal box. Inside were obituaries, all previous owners of the house. All died naturally of old age. The youngest was 43. Then I found the oldest journal, leather-bound and brittle, 1892, written by the man who built the house, Cornelius Ashford. The Paiute tribe warned me, said this land was cursed, that time pooled here like water in a basin. I didn't listen. The house is complete, but I feel the years pulling at me. My hair whitens as I write this. Martha begs me to leave, but I cannot. The land owns us now. His final entry. Figured it out too late. The house doesn't age you. It feeds on your time. Every minute you spend inside is a minute stolen, given to something else, something sleeping below. We are its food, and this house is its mouth. I ran upstairs to find Sarah, but stopped dead in the hallway. The family photos we'd hung last week showed strangers. An elderly couple where Sarah and I should be. Our wedding photo. We looked 70 in it. "Sarah?" I called out. "In here," came a voice from our bedroom. But it wasn't Sarah's voice. Too raspy. Too worn. I found her sitting on the bed, staring at her hands. Her beautiful hands, now spotted and wrinkled, nails yellowed with age. "How long have we been here?" she whispered. I checked my phone. October 15th. We'd moved in on October 1st. 2 weeks. "We have to go. Now." "I'm so tired," she said. "Just need to rest a little." "No!" I pulled her up. "That's what it wants. That's how it keeps people here." We stumbled toward the stairs. Each step felt like climbing through tar. The house groaned around us, a sound like satisfaction. At the front door, Sarah collapsed. "Can't. Just leave me." I carried her, lifted my wife like my grandfather had lifted my grandmother in her final years, kicked open the door. The moment we crossed the threshold, it was like surfacing from deep water. Sarah gasped, color returning to her cheeks. Some of the gray faded from her hair, but not all of it. We sat in the car, engine running, staring at our dream house. In the upstairs window, I swear I saw a figure. Tall, thin, patient, waiting. "We can't sell it to someone else," Sarah said. "I know. So what do we do?" I didn't have an answer. It's been a week since we left. We're staying in a motel outside Portland, trying to figure out our next move. The aging has stopped, even reversed a little, but we both look 10 years older than we should. The house calls to us. In dreams, I'm walking those halls again, feeling time slip through my fingers like sand. Sarah wakes up crying, saying she can hear the floorboards creaking. I've contacted a lawyer about the sale. Turns out Janet Morrison doesn't exist, never did. The real estate company has no record of her. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. I've been checking the listings. The house is back on the market. Same price, new realtor. James Patterson, supposedly. The photos look inviting, warm, perfect for a young family. Someone's going to buy it. Someone like us, desperate for a chance at home ownership, willing to overlook the red flags. I've tried reporting it. The city says there's no record of deaths at the property except the disclosed one from 1978. The journals I took crumble when I try to show them to anyone else. So I'm telling you this story, all of you, because maybe if enough people know, someone will listen. Someone will investigate. Or maybe you'll be the one who sees the listing. $75,000 for a Victorian mansion. Original hardwood floors, wrap-around porch. The perfect dream home at an impossible price. If you see it, you'll be tempted. I know you will. But remember Brett's gray hair. Remember Sarah's spotted hands. Remember the journals hidden in the walls and the thing that feeds on time sleeping beneath that perfect, hungry house. Remember that some prices are too good to be true, and some hungers can never be satisfied. Sarah's calling me. Says she found something online. Old property records. Something about what was there before the house. About why the Paiute tribe avoided that land. I'll update you if we learn more. If we have time. Time? It's funny how you don't appreciate it until someone starts stealing it from you. Until you feel it rushing through your fingers like water, impossible to hold. Check the comments below if you want to know more about what we found. And if you're from Willow Creek, if you know about the house on Sycamore Street, please, tell us what you know, before another family makes our mistake, before the house feeds again. Wait, I need to tell you what happened next, what Sarah found. You need to know all of it. Sarah's laptop screen glowed in the dim motel room. She'd been researching for hours,
her fingers flying across the keyboard with a desperation I recognized. The same need to understand that had consumed me in that attic. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward me. It was a digitized newspaper from 1891, the Willow Creek Gazette. The headline made my skin crawl. "Local prospector claims to find time pool on native land." The article described Cornelius Ashford, the man who'd built our house. He'd been mining for gold near the Paiute Reservation when he discovered something else. A place where the very air shimmers with temporal distortion and watches run backward. "He built the house on top of it," Sarah whispered. "Whatever he found." I kept reading. The Paiute elders had warned settlers to avoid that specific plot of land for generations. They called it the hungry ground in their language. Said it was a place where something ancient fed on the years of the living. "There's more," Sarah said, pulling up another document, a surveyor's report from 1952. "Every surveyor who spent more than an hour on that land aged visibly. Look at these photos. Before and after pictures. A young man with dark hair entering the property. The same man leaving hours later with gray temples and deep lines around his eyes." "How is this not public knowledge?" I asked. Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Check this out." She showed me a series of property transfers. The house had changed hands 43 times since 1892. Average length of ownership, 58 days. "The records get buried," she continued. "New buyers, new realtors who may or may not exist. The house always gets sold quickly, always below market. Always to desperate families who don't ask enough questions. Like us." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop looking into the house." Sarah's phone buzzed simultaneously. Same message. We stared at each other. My mouth went dry. Another text. "You got out. Stay out. Not everyone is so lucky." "Who is this?" I typed back. 3 dots appeared, showing they were typing. Then nothing. The dots disappeared. An hour later, a knock at our motel door. Sarah grabbed my arm. We weren't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw a woman. Elderly, wearing a faded floral dress. She held a manila envelope. "I know you lived in the house," she called through the door. "I have information about what's underneath." I opened the door with the chain still on. Up close, she looked familiar somehow. "My name is Grace," she said. "Grace Patterson. I lived in that house in 1987, for 93 days. 93 days. She should have been dead. "How?" Sarah asked. Grace smiled sadly. "May I come in? This isn't a conversation for doorways." We let her in. She moved slowly but deliberately, setting the envelope on the small table. "I was 25 when my husband and I bought that house," she began. "By the time we escaped, my body thought it was 60. These hands." She held up arthritic fingers. "These aren't from natural aging. I'm only 59 years old." She opened the envelope, spreading out photographs, black and white images of the house throughout different decades. In each one, if you looked closely, you could see faces in the windows. Elderly faces in what should have been young families. "The house doesn't just age you," Grace said. "It feeds your years to something else. Something that's been trapped there since before humans walked this continent." "What is it?" I asked. The Paiute called it the keeper of borrowed days. Not evil, exactly, just hungry. Endlessly, eternally hungry for time. She pulled out a map, hand-drawn and yellowed. "This shows the true boundaries of the affected area. The house sits at the center, but the influence extends about 30 feet in each direction. That's why even the yard work ages people." Sarah leaned forward. "You said, trapped. What trapped it?" Grace's eyes darkened. "That's the worst part. Nothing trapped it. It chose to stay. The Paiute believe it's waiting for something, feeding until it's strong enough to..." She trailed off. "To what?" I pressed. "To move. To spread. Every person who ages in that house makes it stronger. And according to the elders I spoke with,
It's almost ready. My blood ran cold. How many more people? They didn't know. Could be 1, could be 10, but when it reaches full strength... Grace shuddered. Imagine that effect spreading across a whole town, a city, everyone aging decades in days. We have to stop people from buying it, Sarah said. Grace laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've tried for 30 years. Reports get lost, warnings get deleted, evidence crumbles. The house protects itself, or something protects the house. She stood to leave, then paused. There's one more thing. The reason I found you. You're not the first to get out after such a short time. Most who escape early share something in common. What? We asked in unison. You're pregnant, she said to Sarah. Aren't you? Sarah's hand flew to her stomach. We'd only found out a week before moving. Hadn't told anyone. The house can't feed on unborn life, Grace explained. It gives parents a chance to run. A small mercy. Or maybe just practicality. Can't feed on what isn't born yet. She left us with the envelope and a warning. Don't go back. Not even to warn others. The house remembers those who escape. It's hungrier the second time. That night, I couldn't stop studying Grace's documents. The pattern was there, hidden in plain sight. Every 40 to 50 years, the house would claim someone for keeps. Not just age them, consume them entirely. 1897, Cornelius Ashford, found dead at 41, looking 90. 1943, the Hendricks family, all 4 members aged to death within 6 months. 1988, Grace had escaped, but her husband. The records showed he'd returned alone to get their belongings, found dead a week later, aged beyond recognition. 2019, the Waynes, the journal writers we'd found, but there was a note in Grace's papers. Only 3 of the 4 family members were found. 1 was still missing. Sarah was on her laptop again, cross-referencing disappearances with property records. Oh my God, she breathed. Look at this. She'd found a pattern in the listing photos. Each time the house was photographed for sale, there was something in one of the windows. Sometimes a shadow, sometimes a reflection. But when she zoomed in and adjusted the contrast, faces, elderly faces in the glass. Different in each photo, but always there. Always watching. It keeps them, I said, the realization hitting like ice water. Whatever it doesn't consume, it keeps. My phone rang. Unknown number. Don't answer that, Sarah warned, but I'd already swiped accept, breathing, slow, rattled breathing like through ancient lungs. Then a voice, paper thin and desperate. Come back. Who is this? Come back, please. So hungry. The line went dead. Sarah was pale. That sounded like an old person. An impossibly old person. We checked out of the motel that night, drove another 100 miles east, but distance didn't help. The dreams started immediately. Not nightmares, exactly. Just dreams of walking those hardwood floors, feeling the house pulse around us like a living thing. In the dreams, we were old, so old our bones creaked with each step. And we were happy. That was the worst part. In the dreams, giving our years to the house felt right, natural, like feeding a beloved pet. We woke, gasping, checking our reflections obsessively. Were those new lines, new spots, or just paranoia? Sarah made a decision. We're going public, really public. Social media, YouTube, everything. Grace said evidence disappears. Digital evidence, spread wide enough, screen recordings, archived posts, make it impossible to erase. She was right. But as she set up the camera, I noticed something that made my heart stop. Her hands. There was a faint tremor in them. And was it my imagination, or were there new lines around her knuckles? Sarah, when did you last feel the baby move? Her face went white. "This morning, I'm sure I felt." But the uncertainty in her eyes told me everything. The house was still feeding. Somehow, across all these miles, it was still taking from us. Just slower now. Subtler. We had to tell our story. Had to warn others. Before it finished what it started. Before we ran out of years to give. I set up the recording equipment while Sarah typed up our experience. We'd post it everywhere. Reddit, YouTube, TikTok, anywhere people might listen. But as I looked at my wife, pale and drawn, I wondered if we were already too late. The house on Sycamore Street was still for sale, still waiting, still hungry. And somewhere in its windows, faces watched. Faces of those who'd stayed too long, who'd fed the thing beneath until there was nothing left but hollow shells, forever pressed against the glass. We uploaded our video at 3 a.m. By morning, it had been viewed 12,000 times. By noon, it was gone. No trace it had ever existed. But you're hearing this now. So maybe, somehow, this version survived. Maybe this warning will reach you. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, if you see a Victorian house priced too good to be true, if the realtor seems nervous and won't venture past the threshold, remember our story. Remember the hungry ground. Remember that some deals cost more than money. They cost time itself. And time, once given, can never be returned. Sarah just showed me something. The listing for the house. The photos have changed. There are new faces in the windows now. One of them looks like Brett, our mover. He went back. God help him, he went back. If you know Brett Connolly from Willow Creek, if his family is looking for him, tell them to check the windows of the house on Sycamore Street. Tell them not to look too long. The faces in the glass are always hungry, always waiting, always watching for the next family desperate enough to believe in dreams that come too cheap. Don't be that family. Please, don't be that family.